Here upstairs next to the wall that needs patched. That's where the baby gate was. We're a work in progress here. But I'm sitting at the window trying to get any tiny bit of a breeze that I can because we still don't have HVAC. We're in Romans 3 today, and we're just gonna jump right into it. I've got a lot to do today. How are you guys doing? I have to go outside, dig 3 holes in the heat, and then come back inside to a house that doesn't even have a refreshing AC. We were already at the nursery looking at plants. Bought a few plants, and the kids are getting cranky. They can't sleep very good, and it's tough. But we're almost to Friday when, God willing, somebody knows what's wrong with our HVAC. Romans 3 could be a little bit confusing at first if you are having trouble understanding it, so I'm just going to read through it and try to explain the gist of it. But do meditate on these words and study them as much as you can. Pray before you read the Bible and ask the Holy Spirit to help you understand. All right, Romans 3. Then what advantage has the Jew, or what is the value of circumcision? Much in every way. To begin with, the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. The Jews initially were God's chosen people. He didn't give like to the ancient Greeks first, he gave to the Jews. What if some were unfaithful? Does their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? By no means. Let God be truth, though everyone were a liar, as it is written. Basically saying, if someone were to be right, how would I say this? When God and man have a difference in opinion, man is always wrong. Just so you know, because God is perfect. But if our unrighteousness serves to show the righteousness of God, and if you have a misunderstanding about what God's opinion is, pray about it. Pray that God shows you, because if you disagree with something in the Bible, you are wrong. And pray that God shows you what that is, and be open and willing to understand what it is and be corrected. Because if you don't like something in here, there's something wrong with you, not God. So just let that, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes we just don't understand. So ask God, who will give graciously without reproach, for wisdom to understand. But if our unrighteousness serves to show the righteousness of God, what shall we say? For God is unrighteous to inflict wrath on us? I speak in a human way. This is verse 6. By no means. For then how could God judge the world? But if through my lie God's truth abounds to his glory, why am I still being condemned as a sinner? Think about Judas, how he gave, this is talking about someone like Judas. We all know that story. Well, not all of us. I didn't until recently, because I'm a new Christian, but Judas is the one that turned Jesus' location in for 30 pieces of silver, something like that? Judas turned in Jesus, and Jesus was crucified on the cross. And so basically someone like Judas would be like, why am I still being condemned if what I did was bad, what I did was evil, but if I didn't do that, you guys would all still be over here bearing your own sins because Jesus wouldn't have died on the cross type thing. God will make good out of your wicked, but you are still responsible for your wicked. So just because you did something bad, like to your neighbor or your friend, and then eventually it turned out to be a good thing, look at the intentions of your heart, and if you were being wicked, though the outcome was great, it's because God made greatness out of your wickedness, and you aren't getting any that doesn't excuse your wickedness. Does that make sense? This is verse 8. And why not do evil that good may come? As some people slanderously charge us with saying, their condemnation is just. So in the first part here of chapter 3, we talk about the Jews and how the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. And what if some were unfaithful? Does their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? Is saying, if someone is faithless, does that mean God is not faithful? No, it doesn't matter how many people don't believe in God. God is still God, and God's will come. His wrath will come, and the judgment will come. Just because Sally doesn't believe in God doesn't mean God still isn't real. He's real and he's true. And don't let your faith, like mine when I was younger, my faith was, I was one of those people that were like, oh, is my trunk open? Anyway, I was like, my faith was dependent on being cool. If I was around a group of people that were like, God isn't real, I'd be like, yeah, I wouldn't even say anything. I'd just be like, maybe God isn't real, and I was very easily, my opinions and my faith is, I think, just being young and insecure and not being very confident and being naive. I wasn't raised in the best way, I guess, in a nurturing way. No disrespect to my parents, but I was just very easily swayed. So my faith or my belief in God was very much dependent on what my sister thought, or what my best friend thought, or what someone that I held their opinion was very high. If they didn't believe, then I didn't believe. And my faith was dependent on someone else. And don't let that be. Just because your husband doesn't believe doesn't mean that you ought not to believe. In fact, it says, if you're saved, so shall your husband be. And through your faithfulness to God, your husband will be saved. Excuse me. So pray for him and stuff. So don't let someone else's faithlessness dictate how you feel, because whether 90% of the world doesn't believe or not, God is still real. And just because they don't believe in him doesn't mean that God won't do what he do, because he vowed to. Okay, let's see. And that part will be more and more and more important to us the longer time goes on, because there's less and less and less believers, and Christians will be persecuted. And you're going to see, even just now, like if you speak out on social media about your belief in God, you're probably going to be bombarded with people that don't believe, calling you names and being really rude. And so you have to stand even stronger. And I'm raising my children to know, just because the general consensus is that God isn't real doesn't mean that he isn't real. He is. And just because most people don't believe he is doesn't mean he's not. So don't let the masses confuse you or dictate your beliefs. Stand strong, even if you're the only one, because it is written that that's how it will be. And I hope that you instill that into your children, because it is only going to get worse unless Jesus comes before then. Let them know that they are not like the world. You see all these people like, why do you homeschool? Your kid's not going to be normal. They're not going to be like other people. Exactly. Like, that's the whole point. Anyway, so let them know that those truths are in here, because then they won't feel so shocked when they go out into the real world and they're like, wow, people really don't believe out here. But if they already know that it's written in the Bible that they don't, they're expecting it, and it's less likely to shake their faith. All right, verse 9. What then? Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both the Jews and Greeks, are under sin, as it is written. None is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. In their paths are ruin and misery, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. So we're all sinners, is basically what this is saying. And you think, I don't know, I'm a pretty good person. Well, think about when you were standing in line at the mall, and one person you perceived to be kind of rude. Like, what kind of thoughts did you have about that person? Were they uplifting and kind? Were you trying to pray for them? Or were you like, man, she's annoying? Or, you've probably sinned, okay? You've probably sinned way more than you even realize. Even if it doesn't come out of your mouth and doesn't turn into action, we're judged by our heart, and we all fall short. And when it says there is no fear of God before their eyes, this all happens because people don't fear God. They don't think he's real. They can't see him. He's not tangible. So they do these things, and it's like they think that God can't see that. Where there is all this sin, there is no fear of God, is basically what that's saying. People don't regard him. So they just sin all they want to, because they just don't believe he's even real or watching or there. And it's easy to just kind of forget about him when you're in a traffic jam, cussing at someone out your window, or judging the neighbor across the street for being some type of way, and then you just go about your business and you totally space it. You've sinned so much, probably just today, that you didn't even realize. So what I used to do when I first became a Christian, when I kept slipping and it was hard for me to in fact, that's when the conviction came from what I was listening to and what I was watching. I speak about that. I never used to I cussed a lot. I watched whatever I wanted. I listened to whatever music I wanted, and I wanted those things. But when I first started to read the Bible, even though I didn't understand it at first, I would pretend that Jesus was right there with me, next to me. And there's a little sign that people have hanging in their house, something like to pretend like Jesus is there with you. Would you be doing what you're doing if Jesus was there, or something like that? And I read that, and I was just like, oh, interesting. So I would go about my day, and before I spoke to my husband, or before I watched a certain show, or before I was going to say something, I pretend like I was talking as if Jesus was right there in the room. Would what I said to the people around me make Jesus happy, or would it not? So I would oftentimes pretend like if I was going to sit down and watch a show, I'd be like, would I watch this if Jesus was right next to me? So that kind of trained me to try to be more aware of God, because he is everywhere all the time, constantly, and he does see what you're doing all the time. And it's kind of easy to slip your mind and you just go back into your old habits, unless you think about, okay, if what I'm doing right now isn't something that I would do in front of Jesus, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. All right, so then we have verse 19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. The righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. So all this prior to was how the law, like I said, before Jesus came, it was totally dependent on the law. You had to keep the law. But now Jesus is here, and you don't have to worry so much about the law, because he came to fulfill the law, as we later read. It says, but now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. Although the law and the prophets bear witness to it, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. There is no distinction. So it doesn't matter if someone very, very good believes in Jesus or someone very, very bad believes in Jesus. It doesn't matter if you've lived your entire life as a serial killer. If you give your life to Jesus and repent, and then 20 minutes later you die, you go to heaven. There is no distinction. Doesn't matter. It doesn't depend on our works, how good we did. I'm not sitting here doing a Bible study for you guys, and then somehow I'm going to have like, God's like, kudos to you or whatever. What I'm doing is more like a side effect of my love for God and what he's done for me. This is just a byproduct of me giving my life to him. It's not, I'm not doing this as a works to earn something, because if my life was dependent on my works for salvation, it's putting the power on me, and it's not. The power of your salvation is in the only way, through faith in Jesus Christ, and your works have nothing to do with your salvation. Of course, we spoke before about how your works matter and how you have to keep repenting and trying to do better and stuff like that, and you're going to be judged by your works. But this chapter 3 is a huge emphasis on, back then Jesus was very new, right? So we had a lot of people that still kept the law and believed in the law and didn't believe in the Messiah. So they were very rigid on the law. And the emphasis here is saying in verse 21, but now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. No more law. If you have belief in Jesus Christ, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Doesn't matter how perfect you think you kept the law before. And you can keep trying to focus on the law to try to make your works good. So Paul's talking to the people who are trying to keep the law to justify their salvation. And they're like, well, I donate to the poor, and I do this every Sabbath, and like all of these things. I say the rituals, I do I sacrifice the lamb, and all these laws that they had are not going to save you more or make you better than somebody else. There is no distinction now. It doesn't matter how much you keep the law, and if someone doesn't keep the law, belief in Jesus Christ is the only way, and there's no distinction. So this was just to really emphasize this, because in that culture back in the day, a lot of the Jews, maybe most of the Jews, I don't know, a lot of the Jews didn't believe in Jesus and still kept the law for their salvation. So that's what this is talking about. It doesn't matter anymore. Whom God put forth as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he had passed over former sins. It was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Then what becomes of our boasting? It is excluded. By what kind of law? By a law of works? No, but by a law of faith. For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from works of the law. Or is God the God of the Jews only? Is he not the God of the Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, since God is one who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith. Do we then just overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. That verse 31 is how a lot of Hebrew roots people or Messianic Jews believe that how it says, do we then overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. It's not saying, how do I describe that? Do we then overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. They use that to justify them keeping the law still. You'll get a lot of Hebrew roots people or Messianic Jews telling you have to keep the law, you have to keep the Sabbath, you have to stay away from pork, and all of these things because they think this verse supports that. But no, it's saying we uphold the law through our faith, not by our works. They misread it. I hope that makes sense. And this is chapter 4. So this is basically, so chapter 3 is basically telling the people that you are no longer saved by the law, you are saved by your faith. And it kind of reminds me of chore charts. I always relate things to young children, but that's the season of life that I'm in. So if this doesn't apply to you, I apologize. But I think about how people do chore charts. No disrespect if you do, but I don't believe in chore charts because it kind of is, you're kind of training the child to do a chore chart to earn something. And they'll only ever do anything because they'd like to earn something. Like they'd only like to they're going to keep the law to earn their salvation. Instead of trying this instead, where you work on the child's heart, where it's a heart issue, where they want to pick up their shoes and they want to help around the house and they have a giving, loving joy to do these things, whether they're rewarded with a chart or not. It's a change of heart they have to do the chores. It's not, they're not doing it strictly just for the golden sticker or the candy or the toy you're going to buy them if they do all these, or the allowance or whatever. We don't have a system so much like that in our house anyway, because we really try to focus on encouraging that behavior despite reward. It's a side effect, a byproduct of our love, that these things come about without grumbling and complaining. Just like me doing this Bible study here has come about because of my love for Jesus Christ. It's not a works I'm doing to earn something. This is just what I love to do because God has changed my heart. Okay, so I hope to see you guys on Friday. Maybe my HVAC will be fixed by then. Stay tuned. I'm really hoping so because it's going to be 96 degrees that day. And I will talk to you guys soon. I'm going to go dig some holes in the burning sun to plant some peonies. Bye.